is the worst thing to do on a first date? Story 1. The worst date I've ever been on was with a guy who immediately started showing me all the topless pics and skirt-up shots of women he took while in New Orleans. Then he proceeded to talk about rape. So yeah, don't show naked pics of strangers and talk about rape. Story 2. Only talk about yourself. You have to listen and ask questions about the other person's life, and they should reciprocate that to you. Also, going on your phone. Story 3. If you don't agree on something, ask how you will raise the kids. Then you could start negotiating about how you would divide assets during the divorce. But that could be misconstrued as playful banter. Stick to your guns. Let her know it's not a joke. You need to get to the bottom of this issue if there's any hope for this relationship, which is currently only 20 minutes old. If she genuinely acquiesces, ask her if it's because she's weak-minded or weak-willed, because it's just as disconcerting as her wanting to put beans in chili, let alone call it chili after the fact that she has put beans in it. Story 4. Be really charming. Make all the right jokes, observations, and gestures. Make direct eye contact. Be super friendly but not flirty, with your server just enough to make your date say, "Wow, my date is so cool with strangers." Then when the food comes, eat with your hands, sloppily, burp loudly, don't look up from your meal. Snort and snarl a little from time to time, grab food from your date's plate and right as you're about to touch it say, "Can I try yours?" Don't wait for a reply, just shove it into your mouth, and before you're able to even chew, put more food in your mouth if you can, then at the end, insist on paying because that's what a good gentleman ladidate does. For an added bonus, add "Don't worry, you can pay next time." Story 5. According to my girlfriend, drink apple juice. We've been together for a year and a half and she hasn't dropped it, even after she did an Instagram poll that she lost, and every single other person we ask takes my side. So hey Race, the story, it's one of those, everyone tells us we should date, but we pretend to ignore it and get embarrassed things. So there is some build-up. We go to our first proper date after I asked her out on a sort of date at her house. We go to a fairly nice lunch restaurant in town. We get to a table and we order drinks. We are both 17 AMD drinking age when not with parents is 18 in the UK, so no booze. I obviously order the apple juice and she says nothing about it, because who would? We have a nice date finishing off at the museum because obviously I am so immature and unclassy, go figure. Everything was a tad awkward, but first dates when you're still fairly young and new to relationships will always be like that. But it was good. After maybe 6 months, she tells me in an offhand comment that apple juice was a weird thing to drink on a first date. I am confused AMD rather than explain it at any point. She just says I don't know, it just is and doubles down. It goes on for months. Every so often she brings it up and is really surprised and shocked that I don't agree with her. Every time I get confused by her judgment of my beverage choice, she says that I am the weird one and that I just don't understand. I contribute it to maybe her having grown up in America, and maybe it's a thing there. I've lived in the UK all my life. Finally she gets so annoyed that I don't agree and forms an Instagram poll for those who read the original. I realize I spelled poll wrong. I am a silly mongoose asking her like 400 followers what they think. It is almost unanimously in my favor, and rather than admit, she doubles down and says everyone is weird. A year later, she has asked anyone that would answer about it, and the only person to truly agree is her mum. I give up and resign myself to an apple juice-less existence. I comment on a AskReddit post about worst things to do on a first date. I get a bunch of replies about how she be crazy and I should dump her. I won't dump her over that. She is cool with everything else. But I will listen to all of those replies telling me to bulk buy apple juice and solely drink apple juice around her. Sorry if some words are missing spaces between them. My phone keyboard has too much of a gap below the spacebar, so I miss it a lot. Edit. Everyone wanted more context, so I added a bunch. Edit 2. I think we solved it. I have grown up 100 in Britain. My girlfriend grew up in America until the age of 13. Everyone who agrees with my girlfriend seems to be American or at least not English. Well, I can now go back to her and tell her she is just a filthy fire ahem, that it's to do with social norms. In America, kids drink apple juice, so American adults who are more predisposed to judging people think it's weird and childish. But in the UK, everyone drinks apple juice and therefore it isn't weird for a British lad. Edit 3. I feel like I should say not all Americans clearly, but it is a thing in America, so therefore a fair few Americans do have this opinion. Story 6. I have a story for this. I met a girl at a dance club back in the day. This was before Facebook and such, so the thing to do was just exchange home phone numbers and plan to meet again or chat over the phone. Well, we exchanged our numbers, spoke to each other over the phone and planned a date. We were going to a restaurant on the main road of town. It was kind of known as the place to go on dates. Although over the phone she told me she knew the restaurant owner's daughter from school and told me she had been quite mean to her during school and that she refuses to support their business. I suggest other locations and asked for suggestions, but she insisted on going there still. I just go ahead with it at that point and set a time to go. I go to pick her up on the night, and after she hop into the car she informs me she called the restaurant and told them she had a strict diet she had to follow given to her by her doctor, but wanted to go there for dinner with someone. They allowed her to bring a meal she prepared to eat while at the restaurant. I reacted unfazed and chill with it to seem cool. We eventually get to the restaurant and my meal is on its way, so she pulls hers out of a little lunchbox bag. Out the strange creator pulls a dish, on it being a can of tuna, a slice of bread, coleslaw, salad with a boiled egg. For dessert she treated herself with a half a packet's worth of biscuits from the packet. In meaning the long crinkly really loud whenever you touch it packs. Definitely memorable. Story 7 It wasn't what I did, but my date left the movie 30 minutes early to drink at the bar, and flirt with men there. I returned to the bar after the movie, bought more beer for my date and engaged said men in conversation that led to my date being completely ignored. It went downhill from there. Story 8 Demand to order for them. Order them a salad in their salad, eat their salad, leave, making them pay for both meals. At 3 a.m. scream in their bedroom window, call the cops on them for a domestic disturbance. When the cops arrive, accuse your date of shitting in your salad and then stealing it. Once arrested, use your one phone call to arrange another date. Only this time you planted them in their salad hole. Once a month after that leave a salad on their doorstep that gets aggressively bigger each time. Come back from a toilet with a bit of poo on your forehead. Story 9 So my boyfriend and I were friends for a couple years before we officially got together. We had countless nights where we spent hours talking at the bar that could definitely be considered first dates. But when we actually got together we decided to get fancy and have an official first date. He was super nervous because OMG it's happening for real. I'm taking her out to dinner. In no particular order he checked his phone, didn't hold the door for me, spit tomato on me, spilled his drink on his shoes, tripped and fell on the sidewalk and ripped his pants. Still one of the best dates I've ever had in my life. And every date we go on now I tease him about ruining it. Edit format error. Stupid mobile. Story 10 I know this guy. We'll call him Mark. He took this girl out on a date to a sushi place and she had amazingly never had wasabi. He convinced her it was like a room temperature dessert, some kind of green tea flavored sweet or something. So she ate it all in one bite. Against all odds, they're still dating. Story 11 Well I'm black and the first thing she said was pick me up at the driveway. My parents are a tad racist. She then proceeded to tell me she had Nazi blood and had a family crest. So yeah I'm thinking well have a fall wedding. Edit I should mention that she seemed a little proud of the whole Nazi blood thing. She didn't at all seem burdened by it haha. Story 12 I had one first date where the other person spent the entire time talking about getting revenge on various exes. I ended that one with a polite handshake. Story 13 I once turned up to a date tripping my nuts off on LSD, accompanied by a friend. I then proceeded to regale her with my acquisition of free water from a local cafe in the park. Surprisingly I got a second date, but she turned out to be racist as so hey. Story 14 My worst date ever was at Buffalo Wild Wings. We met up, ordered our food and started chatting. About 5 minutes and he's on his phone and starts talking about his boat, a tiny fishing boat, and how he's trying to sell it. There is about 5 minutes of silence as he texts someone from Craigslist about this boat. How long have you been trying to sell it? I asked. About a few years. I proceeded to ask why he hasn't found a buyer in so long. He said he's had plenty of inquiries and would even consider giving it away, if the person who wanted it could prove they knew how to use it correctly. I tried explaining to him that's not how selling things work. You sell it, then it's theirs and whatever happens is on them. I should have just gotten up and left. But he also seemed a little sketch so I thought I'd just play it out and leave immediately after dinner. He was incredibly rude to our server, continued texting about his boat, and routinely left the table to take smoke breaks. Once I found out he smoked it was over anyway, but everything else was just icing at the end. He said he really enjoyed our time and wanted me to go back to his place with him. I respectfully declined and never texted him again. TLDR guy just kept talking about selling his boat but he had to make sure the buyer was worthy. Story 15 Talk about an ex. Forget your wallet at home happened to me. Restaurant was super cool about it and the waiter covered me. I tipped him 100 ul. Edit I forgot to say I went back and tipped him. Story 16 There's always this. Went on a date that was pretty promising. Had genuinely good time with her and she asked me to come up to her apartment. She joked that no sexy time. Since her roomie was there, this roomie turned out to be some guy, who greeted me with this blank stare, but didn't say anything else. Then it turns out that the roomie is actually her husband, but according to her they're only married for the social benefits. At this point I hear a truck full of red flags being dumped on the floor and bail out. I snoop a bit on Facebook and see a shitload of pictures of her and with her roomie traveling around, all the usual happy couple pictures etc. Then there's a post from her where she ranted how her husband had cheated on her, and that was the point where I connected the dots. So glad I didn't become the means of getting back to her husband. Story 17 Cried while talking about an ex-girlfriend. Actually happened to me. Then proceeded to show me pictures of her. Then he proceeded to grill me about my exes and how tall each of them was. He has 57. He flipped his when he found I dated a guy who was 64. Story 18 Vomit on me while having with my brother as I'm arrested for the kitty you planted on my phone. You'll be lucky to get a second date with that kind of attitude. Edit It's not a reference or anything that happened. It's just the worst thing I could think of off the top of my head real quick. Story 19 I had a friend who said she walked out on a Tinder date because he kept talking about the length of his schlong. As a male myself it makes me curious when guys continuously brag about their schlongs. It's either a complete lie or a complete truth. Story 20 Not tipping at a restaurant. Even if you don't agree with tipping for whatever reason, still do it on a first date. This isn't to say you should tip some ridiculous amount, just enough to show that you're not cheap. Have a friend who was having a great date with a girl, and when it came to spilt the bill he not only didn't tip but gave a 5-minute explanation to her on why you should never tip for anything. Needless to say there wasn't a second date. Story 21 A few things I consider bad in general: looking at your phone, talking about your ex, only talking about yourself. There are of course extremes that turn in red flags, but from an overall perspective of the normalized populace those 3 things are considered bad. Story 22. He mentioned how we'd keep our finances separate when we lived together and that he didn't want to be responsible for anything to do with my children. Yes please, sign me up for a future with a roommate who expects. Story 23. Not my story but gonna tell it anyway. This guy I know went to his date's house after their first date. Not only had he just met this girl but then impromptu had to meet her parents. He walks in and starts awkwardly talking to her parents when their pet budgie lands on his foot. He flicks his toe. He said this was a reflex motion and the budgie lands directly in the open fire. He never saw her again. Story 24. The best one I've seen was a guy dating two girls at the same time, same restaurant and jumping tables, until he got caught and claimed the other one was a relative. I can still see that slap flying on slow-mo. Story 25. Once went on a horrible first date with someone I met on a train and at the time, seemed to have a connection with, about midway through the meal, and it's been so long I can't remember context. She said she could see why Hitler thought he was right, then argued his case. It was about that time that I started talking to the people at the next table. Story 26. You know that OL pickup line where you go let me wipe of your seat and then wipe your face with a napkin. I'm gonna bet that doesn't go over well most of the time. Story 27. Invite someone on a date via email because you misremembered who they were from a college class, and then just stare blankly at them when they meet you for the date, over a decade later, and I'm still bitter as Alexis. Story 28. I don't know if it's the worst, but if you go for dinner in a restaurant, or even just stop at a fast food place for a quick bite to eat, never mistreat the employees of said restaurant. How you treat others is a major indicator of your personality as a whole. I had a great date a couple of years back. We went to a local festival and were enjoying the random booths on the street. We decided to stop for a quick burger at an AW. My date was a total to the server. He basically made a lot of sarcastic jokes and rude comments when the server was just doing his job, example being but not limited to. Server, do you want cheese on your burger? Date, well of course I do. Turns to me and says loudly, is that a joke? What burger doesn't come with cheese? Ridiculous. I ordered my food, ate and excused myself. He showed a side of him that was a proper. Story 29. Watch a W5 documentary on a man who posed as a woman on Plenty of Fish, lured men into his garage and killed them, while on a first date hookup from Plenty of Fish. Good times. Story 30. If you don't actually know whether the two of you have a good personality match, it's probably not a good idea to go for something like a really intimate, romantic dinner setting. It might get really awkward really quick for both of you. Story 31. Go. My neighbor was separated and then divorced after a long marriage 30 years. He went on a date with a friend of a friend type. They hit it off and end up back at his newly empty house. Being out of the dating game for years, he wasn't prepared and well wham bam thank you ma'am. He's 54, and his new roommates are early 40s and about 2 weeks old. His daughter, her husband and his 3 grandchildren are also visiting this weekend. Her daughter and grandchildren are also coming for a cookout today. He spent a few hours on our deck last night drinking a bit and afraid to go home. His divorce hasn't even been final 6 months. Had the 1,000-yard stare going. Story 32. Ask for a, yeah I did that. I did however end up marrying her. We have twin girls with another girl due in a month. I think my first date horniness worked out. Story 33. On the subject of mental health, just as the other tables go quiet toward the end of an otherwise pleasant evening. Miso, have you ever tried to kill yourself? Story 34. I read a story about a guy who at the end of the date plucked a girl's hair out of her head, then flossed with it at the end of their normal meal. Story 35. Talking about your ex or being an atheist and then making fun of your date's religion if they have faith. Same goes for the opposite. That's a big no-go for me. I don't care that you don't believe in God and I don't try to change your mind because that's none of my business, but I expect you to treat me the same way. My faith is none of your business, no matter how ridiculous you find it. Story 36. In her mouth. Recent experiences not brushing teeth, even when you've been politely called on it and given the opportunity to do so, going on about X for 15 minutes. Then continue to do so after being called on it, never asking questions, wearing a t-shirt that says you see the look on my face but you still keep talking, admitting you have mental issues that include homicidal tendencies, getting angry or attacking the person over a conflicting view, not make an offer to go have-a-seas unless it was established ahead of time, who's paying, make pointedly inappropriate remarks about their appearance when first meeting. For example, you're a lot bigger than they look in your pictures. Thanks, repeatedly calling someone by a pet name when they've asked you to stop, repeatedly touching someone when they've asked you to stop, be rude to other people, wear Crocs. Story 37. The worst thing you or I, last week, can do is get drunk at a wedding beforehand, leave the wedding to meet up with your Tinder date, invite your date back to the wedding on the spot, go back to the wedding with your date, and tell her you drop everything and every other Tinder match to be with a girl like her. Throw in a stupid what your ring finger size joke into the mix with a generous splash of wow you're gorgeous probably 50 times. A dash of waking up with an instant feeling of regret before even remembering why you're embarrassed, and an attempt to gauge interest in a second date the following week. There will be no second date. In my defense, I was extremely drunk, and she was extremely gorgeous. Story 38. Bring your mother in an urn, and buckle it up in the front seat so the date is forced to sit in the back seat. Heard this exact scenario on the radio for the second date update, but my local station does. Likely fake but quite creative and cringy. Story 39. Start talking about your illegitimate child with a chick you never see despite screaming and pounding on her door, and how you sleep on your cousin's couch. I was lonely, reeling from a bad breakup, and he hit on me while I was cashiering at a grocery store. I didn't call him after that awful date. Story 40 Propose. Talk about how many kids you're going to have with your date. Ask them to come to your church. Ask them to meet your parents. Ask them to come to your school and meet your kids. Bring your mom with you. Bring your friends with you. Ask to move in. Say you want to start making babies right away. Talk about how you were a lesbian for 10 years and suddenly you want to meet a guy and settle down. Talk about how your dad molested you. Those are a few of the things I've encountered as a straight guy when meeting women on first dates. Story 41 The worst thing to do is take her to dinner, where what she presumed to be fish and chips is raw smoked fish. Then miss the start time to a popular movie and go see something terrible. Oh, and do calculus homework while waiting for the movie. Maybe not the worst. We got married almost 20 years later. Story 42 Ask the girl what her ring size is and ask her when she will start her conversion to your religion so you can get married. This happened to my neighbor's niece a few nights ago when she went on her first date with a guy she matched with on Tinder. Story 43 with the first question. How many kids do you want? I want 5 or 6. Talk about how the South was the right side during the Civil War. Explain your love of nipple clamps and BDSM. Go on a long rant about Muslims. This was all in one date. I did not call or text her again. Story 44 Take her to dinner and order finger food, then take out some glue and put it on your hands, and then when you start eating say this is no good, food's way too sticky, then your pants 3 times and ask the waiter what he thinks about your date. Story 45 Ask a lot of questions involving Jews. You don't have to be for or against Jews, just appear to be overly concerned about them. Story 46 So it didn't even make it to the first date. A guy I knew from work a few years ago made a friend request on FB, and at first I couldn't remember who it was until I looked at pics. I accepted and figured he was like everyone else, just wanting to add a friend and not really talk. I don't get on FB much anymore, but the next time I did, there was a message that asked if I wanted to get together for dinner sometime. To call him, I didn't call. Then the next time I'm on FB, he sees me on there and sent a wave or whatever they call it. I didn't respond. The next time I'm on there, I was answering questions about an item I had for sale on a swap shop, and he pops up and says I guess you're too good to talk to his profession. Well, that sort of got to me, and so I responded that I just don't get on FB but maybe once a week, but that I was trying to answer questions from multiple people and I would respond after that died down a bit. He said okay, and that he just wanted to ask my advice on something I would know about. Then he called me. I asked how did he get my phone number, and he said he wouldn't tell me who gave it to him because he promised he wouldn't. I have narrowed it down to 4 people from my former workplace, but he would not reveal who it was, so on to his situation that I could help him with. I thought it was probably something to do with my former workplace and said to ask what he wanted. He proceeded to tell me about his wife passing away about 6 months prior, and then the 2 women who he had shown interest in, they responded positively, and then they suddenly shut him out. I told him from what he told me that I thought he was coming on way too strong. This story took a long time for him to tell me, and mixed in with the story, there were tears and anger and just a lot of bitching. I'm a fairly compassionate person and stayed on with him way too long. By the end of the convo hours later, I was invited to come stay with him, out in the country somewhere I've not been, and we could do some drugs, meth, and have amazing for hours. I'm not a prude, I've done some drugs but never meth. I told him I really needed to get off the phone and get some sleep, and finally said I would let him know about getting together. The next day, my phone blew up, messages, calls, text, the works. I was with my daughter and son-in-law and they asked about it and then were really concerned. She helped me block him on everything. I ended up doing what the other women had done to him. He still left a few more voicemails and one that said he didn't understand. Well, I agree with that, he did not understand, so my thing not to say on a first date or even before that, don't do any of the above, yikes. Story 47 Before the date, only show pictures of yourself from 10 years ago, in which you had hair and were much better looking. Also, lie about your height and weight. Girls love when you lie about these things. 1. Immediately start the conversation with political talk. 2. When that seems to upset your date, talk about how many children your religion expects her to have. 3. When she's baffled by this, mention that religion and politics are tied into your very fiber. Mention politicians that were in office before she was born. 2. 4. Upon entering the restaurant, exclaim, wow, I'm so glad there are only white people in here. 5. While taking your date home, talk over her at every chance and then get very pissed off at her for not telling you when to turn and that it's her fault that you missed the turnoff. Act surprised when she says she'll walk the 2 miles home in the middle of February. That was pretty much the worst first date I've ever had. Story 48 Long, loud and proud. The worst date I had. I picked him up after a half hour of figuring out where in his friend's apartment complex I could even drive into. Finally get him in the car and he's very obviously tipsy. I make a few attempts to push the date off to when he was sober without saying so, but he wasn't having it. You think I'm drunk? Oh my god, you totally think that. I'm not drunk, Jesus. -5 points for lying to Jesus. Finally get to the restaurant, and he orders a beer. Okay, fine, but I wasn't sure that was the best option. We get partway into the date, and he bursts out explaining that he had been hanging out with friends beforehand to celebrate getting through a test, but he had been drinking because he was nervous about the date. I joked about it not being the healthiest coping mechanism for anxiety, and my sarcasm didn't go through at all. I think I solidified his patterns, actually, and he talked about getting another drink. In any case, he said he was drinking especially because he still wasn't comfortable with being gay. Okay, I've handled a few friends who struggled with that, so we talked about that for a hot minute. Afterwards, we finish out the date, me giving the nicest but firmest signals that there probably shouldn't be a second, and he winds up inviting me to a club with his friends, saying he needed another drink, super not interested. Story 49. This will be buried, but 2 years ago my sister had a pretty nice first date with some strange guy. This guy went to McDonald's with her, and at the counter he insisted on getting a quadruple cheeseburger, usually triple is max, but he argued for 10 minutes with the lady at the counter to get his quadruple cheeseburger. After he ate it, he vomited straight into the next trash can. Story 50. Don't order the milk steak and jelly beans. Don't eat a bunch of cheese before, and don't mispronounce philanthropist and accidentally tell her you are a full-on rapist. Story 51. Had a girl show me a pic that was sent to her, then she scrolled to the same picture, only she had drawn on a cowboy hat and sheriff's badge, so yeah that. Story 52. This one actually happened to me. Lying about being single, I was on a date and the guy mentioned he knew a good friend of mine, so I texted my friend about being on a date with his friend. I thought it was so cool we had mutual friends because I happened to meet him on a dating app. My friend replied and said I'm sitting next to his girlfriend right now. Date ended right after that, obviously.